I wasn't expecting balloons, or cake, or streamers, or a surprise party, or even dinner. But I did expect something. Just a text. A simple, "Happy birthday, sis." That's all. Instead, I sat in my living room that morning, still in my pajamas, the coffee going cold beside me as I scrolled through my phone. I refreshed my messages. I checked my missed calls. I double-checked my notifications. Nothing. I whispered to myself, maybe she posted something? I opened social media. Nothing there either. Not even a recycled story. Not even a lazy emoji reaction. I stared at the screen, stunned at how empty it all looked. The kind of empty that sinks into your chest, slow and sharp. It wasn't about the cake, or the candles. It was about what it meant to be forgotten. Her name is Paige, my sister. And growing up, we were inseparable. I was the older one by 2 years, but she was always louder, always flashier, always the one who got noticed. And I didn't mind. I liked being the quiet one, the steady one, the one who remembered birthdays, showed up early, picked up the slack. I'd never missed a single one of hers, not once. Her 10th, when she cried because Dad forgot. I made her a card by hand and baked cupcakes from a box. Her 21st, when her boyfriend dumped her that morning. I took her out, paid for every drink, let her cry on my shoulder until sunrise. Even last year, when I was working overtime to keep things afloat, I still made time to drive an hour to surprise her with flowers and a gift. I stood outside her door like a fool while she took a full minute to answer, hair still wet from a shower, barely hiding her shock. Paige said, "Oh my God, I totally forgot it was today. You're so sweet." I remember smiling and saying, "It's okay. That's what big sisters are for." And maybe that was the problem. Maybe I trained her to think I'd always be there. That birthdays, obligations, even respect, those were things she could forget, and I would quietly fill in the gap. No harm done. No consequence. But this year, it hit differently. I looked down at my phone again. 4:12 p.m. Still nothing. The day had stretched on with a kind of aching slowness. I'd gone to work. Gotten a few texts from coworkers. One friend had posted a cute meme. Mom called early in the morning, of course. Her voice always cheerful, always slightly too loud. My mom said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. You doing anything special?" I said, "Just keeping it simple this year." She said, "Well, you deserve the world, you know that?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. But still, not a word from Paige. I tried to brush it off, told myself she must be busy, distracted. Maybe she was planning something late. Maybe she had a surprise lined up. But then I saw her story. She was out, dressed up, brunch with friends, laughing, bottomless mimosas, a sparkly filter that said, "Self-Care Sunday." Self-Care Sunday. On my birthday. I stared at her smiling face on my phone, frozen mid-laugh, and suddenly it all felt absurd, like I was the punchline to a joke no one told me I was in. I said out loud, "Wow." It wasn't the first time I'd felt overlooked, but it was the first time I'd admitted to myself that it hurt, really hurt. It wasn't about entitlement. I didn't need a grand gesture. I just wanted to matter. The rest of the evening dragged by. I made myself pasta, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, ate dinner on the couch in my softest socks, a movie playing in the background I wasn't really watching, and still, no message. Not even a lazy HBD or a confetti gif. Just silence. I thought about all the times she'd needed me, all the moments I'd shown up when no one else did. The phone calls at midnight, the bills she didn't know how to pay, the emotional breakdowns, the babysitting favors, the rushed airport pickups, all the effort I poured into being someone she could count on. And on the one day I wanted her to remember me, nothing. I whispered to myself, "It's just a birthday." But that wasn't true. Because this wasn't about a single day. It was about the slow, steady realization that I had become invisible in someone else's life, while making them a priority in mine. I sat there until the candles I never lit burned in my imagination, until the wine glass emptied, until the phone battery hit red. Still nothing. No call, no text, not even a missed notification.
I went to bed early that night, and as I lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, I felt something in me start to shift. Not rage, not bitterness, just clarity. Clarity that this wasn't working. Clarity that being the dependable one had become a job description I never applied for. Clarity that maybe, just maybe, it was time I started treating myself with the same consideration I gave everyone else. Because Paige didn't forget my birthday by accident. She forgot because she knew she could. And deep down, I think she believed I'd forgive it, that I'd brush it off, like always. But this time, something told me I wouldn't. The day after my birthday, I woke up to a message from Paige. Not happy belated, not sorry I missed your big day. Just one line. Paige wrote, "Hey, think you could help cover the water bill this month? I'll send the login." I stared at the text for a full minute. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. She forgot my birthday, but she never forgot to send the bill. That's when it all started pouring back in, every time I had been her backup plan. Her cushion, her quiet little emergency fund with a heartbeat. There was the time she called crying because her car broke down outside a grocery store. Paige said, "I'm stuck. It's freezing. I don't know what to do." I left work, picked her up, paid for the tow, paid for the repairs. I even brought her dinner that night because she said she hadn't eaten. Then the time her credit card got declined at a pharmacy. Paige said, "It's just a short-term thing. My paycheck's late. I'll pay you back Friday, I swear." She didn't. I never brought it up. Then there was the rent fiasco. Paige said, "I just need help this month. And maybe next. I'm waiting on this new job to start. You're the only one I can ask." I transferred her $850 without hesitation. Skipped my own dentist appointment to make it work. That maybe next turned into 5 months. Then it turned into something worse. The mortgage. It started during the pandemic. Paige had just bought a house. Too big, too soon, but she insisted it was an investment. When she lost her job, she called me in tears. Paige said, "I'm going to lose the house. The bank's already calling. I can't tell Mom. She'll freak. You're the only one who gets it." I remember sitting in my kitchen that night, staring at my bank account. I was doing okay. Not great, but okay. I had some savings. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. So I offered. I said, "I'll cover the next mortgage payment, just until you get back on your feet." Paige cried on the phone. Paige said, "You're seriously saving my life. Just one payment, that's all I need." But it wasn't one. It was 2. Then 3. Then she sent me the login to her mortgage portal. Told me to just set it to auto so it was easier. And I did. Because I loved her. Because I believed her. Because I didn't want her to lose the roof over her head, especially not with her kids living there too. It felt like the right thing to do, even when she started spending money again, posting brunches, new outfits, treat yourself selfies. I told myself, maybe she got a raise. Maybe things are finally turning around. But the auto pay still went through. Quietly, consistently. Every 15th of the month, like clockwork. She never asked if I could still afford it. Never offered to take it back. Never said, "Thank you." Not really. She just sent occasional texts that said, Paige wrote, "Got the confirmation. You're the best." Or, "Ugh, forgot to cancel Prime again. Mind spotting it?" And I always did. Not because I wanted to be used, but because I wanted to be needed. That's the thing about family. You tell yourself it's love. And sometimes it is. But other times, it's just expectation in disguise. Unpaid loyalty, emotional debt. And for years, I paid it. I paid it with money, with time, with patience, with grace. And on the one day I needed her to simply remember I existed, she couldn't bother to type 13 characters. HAPPYBIRTHDAY. But somehow she still remembered to forward me the utility login, still remembered to remind me when the property tax was due, still remembered to include her Venmo handle, just in case you need it. It was like muscle memory, like I had been programmed into her survival. The worst part? I had let it happen. I taught her I'd always say yes, that I'd always be there, that she didn't need to check in, just check out. And now, staring at her latest text about the water bill, I didn't feel pity. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired a nap could fix. The kind of tired that came from being emotionally overdrawn, from giving and giving and giving, until there was nothing left but quiet bitterness. I looked around my apartment. No cards, no flowers, no signs that yesterday had been anything but ordinary. Except it wasn't. It was the day I realized that being forgotten hurts more when it's someone you never forgot, someone you carried through storms, and who never once brought an umbrella for you. That morning, I didn't reply to her text. I didn't Venmo her the money. I didn't log into her mortgage portal. I just sat there, let the silence stretch, and for the first time in years, I didn't do what was expected of me. I didn't answer the call. I didn't announce anything. No dramatic message, no long text, no confrontation, just a quiet decision. Click. Cancel auto payment. I logged out of her mortgage portal, closed the tab, and went on with my day. It was that simple. No storm, no speech, just done. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. I wasn't trying to sabotage her. I was just finally letting her hold what was always hers. Her life, her bills, her responsibility. I had paid enough, for years. And not just in dollars, but in silence, in swallowed feelings, in moments like my birthday, when I sat alone and realized I was easier to depend on than to care about. I had kept the house standing while she forgot the hands that held it up. So I stopped. That week, I focused on me. I bought myself the lamp I'd been eyeing for months. I cleaned out my inbox. I made tea. I took walks in the evening just to hear the wind. And when the 15th came, I let it pass. No transfer, no reminder, no second guessing. The world didn't end. But 3 weeks later, my phone rang. It was 8:42 p.m. I was in the middle of a book I was actually enjoying for once. The screen lit up. Page, mobile. I let it ring once, twice. I almost didn't answer, but I did. I said, "Hey." Paige's voice came through, frantic. Paige said, "Did something happen with the mortgage payment?" I said, "What do you mean?" Paige said, "The bank called me. Said I missed a payment. They left a voicemail saying it's overdue. I don't understand. I thought it was taken care of." I didn't respond. I let the silence hold. She kept going. Paige said, "Did you forget to send it? Or was there an error or something?" I said, "No, I didn't forget." She paused. Paige said, "Okay. Well, are you still paying it? Because I just assumed—" I interrupted. I said, "I stopped." Another silence. This one heavier. Paige said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "You didn't ask." That shut her up for a second. And for once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it hang, just like the silence she gave me on my birthday. She cleared her throat. Paige said, "I mean, if you needed me to start covering it, you could have at least given me a heads up. I would have figured something out." I said, "That's good to hear." She was quiet again. Paige said, "I'm just surprised, that's all." I didn't say what I was thinking, that she wasn't surprised the help stopped. She was surprised she had to deal with it. Finally, I said, "I thought it was time." Paige said, "Time for what?" I said, "Time you handled it yourself." Her tone changed, Less panic, more confusion. Paige said, "But I thought we had an understanding." I almost laughed, not cruelly, just in disbelief. I said, "Paige, there was never an understanding. There was just me, quietly doing it." She started to say something but trailed off. And again, I didn't fill the space. Because that silence she gave me on my birthday, I gave it back. This wasn't about missed payments. It wasn't about the mortgage. It wasn't even about money. It was about a pattern, a loop I had stayed in for too long. Her need, my answer, her forgetfulness, my forgiveness. And for the first time, I let the silence do the talking. Eventually, she mumbled something. Paige said, "Okay, I'll figure it out." I said, "Good." We said goodbye. That was it. No thanks. No apology. Just a click. And yet, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, not pettiness, just peace. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying what wasn't mine. She was on the line now. The bank called her, not me. And in that there was power. A quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience, just a boundary. She showed up at my door 3 days later. No warning, no text. Just a knock, sharp, fast, impatient. When I opened it, there she was. Paige. Ponytail messy. Face red like she'd been holding in a scream all morning. She wasn't dressed for drama, just sweatpants and a zip-up hoodie. But the storm in her eyes said otherwise. Paige said, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked in like she owned the place, like she always had in some ways, like her emergency made the rules. I closed the door behind her. She turned to face me. Paige said, "Why would you do this to me?" I stayed quiet. She threw her hands up. Paige said, "Seriously, just stop pretending this is normal. You've been helping me for years. Years. And now, without saying anything, you just cut it off?" I crossed my arms. I said, "I didn't do anything, Paige. I just stopped doing everything." That stopped her cold. For a moment, her anger wavered. She blinked. Paige said, "What does that even mean?" I walked past her and sat down on the couch. She didn't follow right away. Just stood there in the middle of the room like she didn't recognize the place anymore, like something sacred had been moved without her permission. I said, "It means I stopped carrying the weight, that's all." She finally sat down, more like collapsed, on the other side of the couch. Paige said, "But I thought we had a system, an understanding." I looked at her, this sister I'd loved and lifted for so long, and I felt something rise in my chest. Not rage, not pity, just truth. I said, "No, Paige. You had a system. I had responsibilities. You leaned. I held. That's not a system. That's imbalance." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Paige said, "But you always had my back. You said that. Every time I was in trouble, you were there." I nodded slowly. I said, "Yeah, I was." Because I thought that's what love looked like. Until I realized it was starting to look more like debt. Paige said, "That's not fair." I said, "Neither is being forgotten on your birthday by someone you've rescued more times than you can count." Her face changed, just slightly, a crack in the armor. Paige said, "Wait, this is about your birthday?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I said, "No. It's about every moment leading up to it. The birthday was just the echo, the silence that finally made me hear everything else." Paige said, "I didn't mean to forget." I said, "I know. That's the problem. It was easy for you to forget. Because I made it easy." She looked down at her hands. Paige said, "I didn't realize you felt this way. I thought, I don't know, that we were just helping each other." I said, "When have you helped me, Paige?" She didn't answer, so I asked again. I said, "Name one time. Just one time you asked what I needed. One time you offered to cover something. One time you showed up without needing something." She opened her mouth, paused, closed it again. I said, "Exactly." She looked at me then, really looked at me. And I saw it, not just guilt, but confusion. Like no one had ever told her that love came with limits. Like she honestly believed being family meant a lifetime of free passes. Paige said, "I didn't think you minded. You never said anything." I said, "Because I wanted to protect you. I thought I was being strong. Turns out, I was just enabling you to treat me like a safety net." She whispered, "I never wanted to use you." I said, "But you did." Silence, a thick one. But this time, I didn't feel it. She reached for a pillow and held it against her chest like it might shield her from everything landing all at once. Paige said, "I don't know what to say." I said, "You don't have to say anything. You just have to understand that I'm done bleeding quietly. That I love you, but I don't owe you." Tears welled in her eyes. She wiped them fast, like she didn't want to give me the satisfaction of seeing them, but I wasn't looking for that. I was looking for change. She stood. Paige said, "So that's it? You're just done with me?" I stood too. I said, "I'm not done with you. I'm done being used by you." She nodded slowly, biting the inside of her cheek like she was trying not to scream or cry or both. Paige said, "I guess I deserved that." I said, "No, you didn't deserve it, but you needed it." Another pause. Paige said, "Okay." She turned toward the door. I didn't stop her, but before she opened it, she looked back one last time. Paige said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know I crossed a line." I said, "That's because I never told you where it was." She left. And when the door clicked shut, I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. Because sometimes love means holding on. But sometimes it means finally letting go of the weight someone else refused to carry. She didn't realize love came with limits until she crossed them. And I, for once, stood my ground. After Paige left, I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought maybe I would, that there'd be a wave of grief or guilt or that sick feeling you get when a fight with someone you love hangs in the air too long. But there was none of that. There was only quiet. Not silence, the kind she gave me on my birthday. Not the kind I gave back, but peace. I walked around the apartment picking up small things, a half-folded blanket on the couch, a teacup from the night before. I watered my plant, replied to an email, made a grocery list, the kind of simple, quiet acts that build a life when no one else is watching. And somewhere between rinsing dishes and deleting old voicemails, the truth settled in my chest. I loved Paige, but I didn't owe her everything. That's where I had gotten it twisted for so long. I'd convinced myself that being a good sister meant saying yes, that love meant sacrifice, that helping her again and again was the only way to keep our relationship alive. But if something only survives when you're constantly bleeding for it, maybe it doesn't deserve to survive at all. I sat at my desk and opened my budget spreadsheet. It was something I usually dreaded looking at, but this time felt different. I started going through the rows. Every Venmo transfer, every bill I'd paid on her behalf, every emergency top-up, every "it's just this once" deposit. Over the last 3 years, the total added up to more than I expected. Thousands, actual thousands. All tucked between birthdays she forgot and check-ins she never made. I whispered to myself, the first payment I made was out of love. The last one was out of guilt. And I realized, I'm done paying both. I closed the spreadsheet and didn't feel panic. Just clarity. Because I wasn't just auditing my finances. I was auditing my energy. Where it went. Who it went to. And, most importantly, who gave any of it back. And that list was short. Painfully short. I thought about the friend who mailed me a card last month, just because. The coworker who brought me soup when I had the flu. The neighbor who helped carry my groceries when it rained. None of them had ever asked for a dime. None of them forgot my birthday. I thought about the countless nights Paige had called mid-crisis, and I'd picked up without hesitation. About the way she never said thank you unless it came after a favor. About the way she never remembered my milestones unless I reminded her. And I asked myself a question I had never dared to before. If she weren't your sister, would you still choose her? The answer wasn't easy, but it was honest. Number not like this. Not as someone who only called when she needed help, who took my presence for granted and treated my love like a monthly subscription. I loved her, but I didn't owe her that much. Love, I've learned, is not a debt. It's a gift, one that's supposed to be given freely, but also respected. And if it's not respected, if it's only taken and never returned, then it's not love anymore. It's obligation. It's performance. And I'm done performing. That week, I made quiet changes. I unsubscribed from her utility accounts. I removed my name from the auto payment system. I put the boundaries in writing, not for her, but for myself. Not, I'll help if you're really stuck, but I'm not your financial fallback anymore. Not, I'll come if you really need me, but I can't be your first call every time the world falls apart. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting me. I needed room to breathe, to build, to give where the love came back. Because I realized something else too, something that hit hard in the quiet of those small daily tasks. I had been budgeting my money more carefully than I'd ever budgeted my love. I'd been giving Paige overdrafts of grace while rationing self-care like luxury. But not anymore. I deserve the same loyalty I give. I deserve the same thoughtfulness I offer. And if that makes me selfish, so be it. Because self-respect isn't selfish. It's necessary. I looked around my space, my home, bought on my own, kept afloat by my own work, my own strength, and I realized I built this, not Paige, not anyone else, me. I had been the safety net for so long I forgot I could fly on my own, but now I was ready to lift off, with lighter bags, clearer lines, and no more guilt disguised as generosity, because love without respect is just dependency, and I didn't owe her that much. It started with a card. No flowers, no gift inside. Just a card. One of those simple ones you can find at the corner drugstore. White, gold trim, a little cursive font on the front. I came home late from work and found it slid under my door. No envelope, no dramatic message. Just my name written on the front in her rushed, familiar handwriting. Inside it read, "I didn't see what I was doing until you stopped doing it. I'm sorry. I miss you. Paige." I stared at the handwriting for a long time. Not because it said everything, but because it didn't try to. It wasn't wrapped in excuses. It wasn't another favor in disguise. It was small, honest, human. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her. Not the chaos, not the drama, not the endless asking. Just her, Paige. 2 days later, she texted. Paige wrote, "If you're free sometime this week, maybe coffee?" No agenda. No emoji, no guilt trip, just a request to meet. I stared at the screen for a while, then typed. I wrote, "Thursday works, 5 p.m. Same place as always?" She replied almost immediately. Paige wrote, "I'd like that." Thursday came. I didn't dress up, didn't rehearse any speeches in my head. I didn't know what to expect, and I think that was the most honest thing about it. We weren't meeting as sisters pretending everything was fine. We were meeting as women, flawed, complicated, scarred, trying to find each other again without the weight of what used to be. She was already there when I arrived. Paige stood when she saw me and said, "Hi." I said, "Hey." We hugged. Not too long, not too tight, just enough. She bought my coffee. That was new. We sat near the window. The air between us wasn't heavy. It was careful. Like we were both holding something we didn't want to drop. She spoke first. Paige said, "I've been thinking. A lot." I said, "Me too." She nodded. Paige said, "I didn't realize how much I leaned on you until you stepped back." I said, "I didn't realize how tired I was until I stopped." She looked down at her cup. Paige said, "You were right. About all of it. I got used to you fixing things, covering things. And I thought, that's just how it was supposed to be." I didn't say anything. I let her sit in that truth. She looked up again. Paige said, "I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter." I said, "You didn't make me feel like I didn't matter. You made me feel like I only mattered when you needed something." That hit. She didn't deny it. She nodded slowly and said, "I know. I hate that it took losing your help to see you clearly." There it was, the thing I'd wanted to hear for years. But instead of triumph, I felt calm. I said, "I just wanted to be seen. Not as a bank, not as backup, as your sister." She smiled, a small, tired smile. Paige said, "I see you now." We talked for an hour, not just about the past, about other things too. Her kids, her new job, my garden, a book I was reading. Nothing dramatic, just conversation, equal, open. And when she hugged me goodbye, she didn't say, "Can you do me a favor?" She just said, Paige said, "Thank you for meeting me." I said, "Thank you for asking just to meet." After that, things didn't magically reset, but they began to rebuild. She'd text just to say hi, send a picture of a funny sign, ask about my week. Then one day she dropped by, not to borrow anything, but to drop off a batch of cookies she made with her kids. Paige said, "I remembered you like oatmeal raisin." "Still true?" I said. "Still true." We laughed. They were too salty. She admitted it. Paige said, "I messed up the measurements." But hey, it's the thought, right? And it was. Because for the first time in a long time, she was thinking about me. Not what I could do. Not what I could pay for. Just me. I still kept my boundaries. I didn't start covering bills again. I didn't rescue her when she slipped up at work or vented about money. I listened. I supported. But I didn't fix, and she didn't ask me to. That was the difference. That was everything. We found something new between us. Not the old pattern, not the old roles. Something quieter, stronger, more mutual. It was cautious. It was slow. But it was real. And for the first time, she saw me. Not just my wallet. Not just my reliability. She saw the person who had been there all along. I didn't expect anything. After everything, I had trained myself not to. It made life simpler, cleaner, to live without the weight of hoping someone might remember, might show up, might care enough to do something just because. So when my birthday came around the following year, I planned a quiet night in. Takeout, a good book, maybe a long bath, just peace. I had learned to make peace my celebration, but that afternoon I got a text. Paige wrote, "Can you come by around 6? Nothing fancy, just something. No cake emoji, no happy birthday in all caps, just that." I debated whether to go. I still had a scar from the last one. The way she had forgotten. The way I had stared at my phone, hoping it would light up with something. Anything. But something in her message felt different. So at 6:04, I pulled into her driveway. The porch lights were on. The windows glowed warm. When I knocked, I heard the scramble. Little feet, hushed voices, the sound of someone shushing someone else. Then the door opened. It was her daughter, Mia, holding a balloon by the string and smiling like her face had been waiting all day to light up. Mia said, "Happy birthday, Auntie." Before I could even respond, Paige appeared behind her. Paige said, "Come in." I stepped inside. It wasn't extravagant. No banners, no crowd, no streamers or sparklers, just her dining table, set with mismatched plates and candles. A pot of spaghetti on the stove, a grocery store cake in the center, lopsided but trying. It was perfect. I looked at her. Paige said, "I didn't forget. I said, "I noticed." She walked over and hugged me, not tight, not performative, just present. Then we sat, we ate, we talked. She asked about work, and for once, she listened. I asked about the kids, and she didn't pivot into crisis. There were pauses, there were laughs. It wasn't polished, it wasn't smooth, but it was honest. Halfway through dinner, she brought out a card. Paige said, "It's nothing fancy, but I thought you might like it." It was handmade, just construction paper and scribbles and stickers, clearly made by her and the kids. Inside, it said, "You're more than someone who helps. You're someone we're grateful to know. Happy birthday." I held it in my hands like it was made of glass. I whispered, "Thank you." She didn't say, "You're welcome." She just smiled. After cake, she cleared the dishes. No guilt, no ask, just care. As I got up to leave, she walked me to the door. Paige said, "I know it's going to take time. To rebuild. To fix what I broke." I said, "It's not about fixing." She looked confused. I said, "It's about choosing. Every day. To be different. And today, you chose right." She nodded. Paige said, "I want to keep choosing right." I said, "Then we're already doing better." We hugged goodbye. I walked back to my car, holding that crooked card against my chest. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the giver, the helper, the forgotten one standing in the wings. I felt seen, and that was enough. She remembered my birthday, and I remembered who I was.